Today, we're going to get into the story of one of the most brilliant, most consequential, and, most controversial figures in all of modern history. We're talking about a man who basically harnessed the power of the sun, only to get completely burned by the very fire he created.
You've probably heard these words before. Haunting, right? This is what J. Robert Oppenheimer said he thought of in the moment of his greatest triumph, which of course would become his greatest burden. It's a single line from ancient Hindu scripture that just perfectly captures the unbelievable weight of what he had done.
And that right there, that's the whole paradox of his life. How on earth does a national hero, the celebrated father of the atomic bomb, end up being called a traitor by the very same country he served? His story is this incredible, dramatic arc of unbelievable success, followed by an absolutely devastating public betrayal. To really understand the man, you've got to start at the beginning. I mean, before the bomb, before all the fame and the fallout, there was just this young genius whose mind was absolutely on fire with curiosity.
So, he was born into a pretty wealthy family in New York, and he was a prodigy right from the get-go. But what's interesting is his mind wasn't just stuck on science. No, he was reading everything. Literature, philosophy, you name it. He was a true intellectual force. And by his 20s, he was already at the very top of his field in theoretical physics at Berkeley, really pushing the boundaries of what we thought we knew about the universe.
But that kind of brilliance often comes with a sharp edge. His colleagues, they totally admired his intellect. I mean, how could you not? But a lot of them also kind of feared him. He could be intense, arrogant. This whole duality, the genius and the flaw, it defined his character long before the rest of the world even knew his name.
And then, in 1942, history comes knocking. The world is at war, there's this huge fear that the Nazis are building an atomic weapon, and the US government needs someone to lead their own top-secret mission. So who do they pick? This theoretical physicist with basically zero major leadership experience. General Leslie Groves made the call, and well, that single choice would change the world forever.
Okay, so this next part of his life, it's the absolute peak of his career, but it's also the beginning of his moral torment. This is where he truly becomes the destroyer of worlds, and our world is never, ever the same. You have to understand, the sheer scale and secrecy of this project were just unprecedented. The Manhattan Project was one of the most ambitious scientific efforts in human history. Out in the middle of the desert in a place called Los Alamos, Oppenheimer brought together thousands of the world's brightest minds, all laser-focused on one single, terrifying goal.
And things moved fast. I mean, breathtakingly fast. In just 3 years, they went from pure theory to a terrifying reality. The Trinity test in July 1945 proved it could be done. And then, less than a month later, it became a weapon of war, first over Hiroshima and then Nagasaki.
And the human cost, it was just staggering. The bombs did bring World War II to an end. Yeah, but at the price of more than 200,000 lives. It's a number so huge, it's almost impossible to wrap your head around, and it would haunt Oppenheimer for the rest of his life.
And you can see how immediate that remorse was. Not long after the war, he meets with President Truman, and this is what he says. He's not celebrating, he's not taking a victory lap, he's grappling with the absolute moral horror of what he helped create.
But, the political world, it had very little patience for a scientist's guilty conscience. Truman's response was just cold, dismissive. And that moment, right there, that's the turning point. The hero who delivered the ultimate weapon was now seen as a liability, an emotional crybaby who just wasn't cut out for the harsh realities of the new atomic age.
So that really sets the stage for the final, tragic act of his public life, his systematic takedown. The very government that he served would now turn on him, all in the paranoid chaos of the Cold War.
So why? Why did they turn on him? Well, it started after the war. Oppenheimer started using his influence to plead for caution. He wanted international control of nuclear weapons. And, maybe more importantly, he was dead set against the rush to build the even more powerful hydrogen bomb. To him, this wasn't just a bigger bomb, it was a weapon of pure genocide. And that stance put him on a direct collision course with some very powerful people who wanted American dominance, not moral restraint.
And the political climate at the time gave his enemies the perfect weapon to use against him. The Red Scare created this intense atmosphere of paranoia and suspicion, and Oppenheimer, back in his Berkeley days, had friends and associates with leftist, even communist sympathies. In the 1950s, those old connections suddenly became evidence that he was disloyal.
His downfall was like a calculated, step-by-step process. First, his opposition to the H-bomb made him a target. Then, they dug into his past and weaponized it. That led to this formal hearing where he was accused of being a security risk. But let's be real, the outcome was decided before it even started. His security clearance was revoked, his government service was over, and he was publicly branded a traitor.
This quote from him, man, it just says it all. He truly believed that by creating the bomb, scientists had crossed some kind of moral line. They had gained this terrible knowledge, this sin that could never be unlearned, and they, and we, would have to live with that burden forever.
So, what happened to Oppenheimer after this massive fall from grace? Well, his last years were spent in a sort of public exile. But his story, it wasn't quite over yet. His legacy was still being shaped.
So even though he was pushed out of the halls of power, Oppenheimer never stopped thinking, never stopped speaking. He just shifted his focus. He started lecturing on the relationship between science and society, ethics, responsibility. In 1963, he got a symbolic gesture of redemption when he was given the Enrico Fermi Award. But the scars were still there. He died just a few years later, a man who was forever defined and haunted by the atomic bomb.
And so here we are, right back where we started, with this central conflict. Was he the hero who ended a world war, or the traitor who was exiled from the very system he helped save? The truth, of course, is that he was both. His story really forces us to look at some uncomfortable truths about patriotism, about power, and about the real price of progress. This is what he said about witnessing that first atomic blast at the Trinity test. And it just perfectly captures the awe, the terror, and the deep uncertainty of that moment. In that one flash of light, every single one of them knew that humanity had just entered a new and much, much more dangerous era. There was no going back.
And really, that's what this all boils down to. Oppenheimer's personal struggle has become a question for all of us. He and his team, they opened Pandora's box, and the knowledge of how to destroy ourselves can't be put back in. So the question his life leaves us with is this: who's responsible now? Who carries that weight today?